Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Taylor, and for today's video I am doing a very late July wrap-up of all of the books that I read in July. July was a very interesting reading month for me because I made a very structured TBR of 2 different readathons that I wanted to do, and then didn't really read any of those books until like the last week and a half of the month, and then I also went on vacation, and it was a good reading month in general. I did read 10 things and I got really far in an 11th book. I just didn't really accomplish anything that I wanted to do in terms of readathons. I wanted to do the medieval-a-thon, and even though there are prompts that I could like take books that I did read and put them under those prompts, I'm not going to mention it here just because I didn't read any of the books that I picked out for the medieval-a-thon, so that's a big yikes on my part. I'm gonna go ahead and start with the book Junkie trials though, because I did do a little bit better on that readathon. I was on Team Bard, and holy moly was I glad I was on Team Bard, because one of the special things that Team Bard could do was DNF a book as a completed prompt, and I definitely did that. I DNF'd the Bookie Grail itself, Stardust by Neil Gaiman. I actually had this in my possession and was going to read it, but I saw a lot of people not really enjoying it, and it was a struggle to try and read the other books for the book Junkie trials, so I DNF'd it, and I still didn't finish all the books, but we're gonna go ahead and get into the ones that I did read for that. And the first book was The Elfin Guard, and that was read a book with military or political themes. And for that, I read His Majesty's Dragon by Naomi Novik. I ended up giving this book 3 out of 5 stars. This is the first book in a series that chronicles the Napoleonic Wars, but a retelling of them because there are dragons that are fighting in this war. We follow a young Navy captain named Lawrence, and when a dragon egg hatches for him, he has to move from the Navy to the Royal Air Force because he is now a dragon rider, and he has those responsibilities now in taking care of the dragon and then kind of being the captain of the dragon. Like, they're like warships in this series. This book was very enjoyable. It was a very fast read. It was pretty fun. I did feel the middle gradeness of it sometimes, more than others, just in terms of how it was written. It's very straightforward, but I really enjoyed it. Will I continue on with the series? Probably. It's definitely not on my priority of books to read, and I was kind of wishing that I had picked it up when I was a little bit younger. I feel like I would have enjoyed it a lot more, but I did really enjoy it. It was a solid read. It was fairly fast to get through. I am a sucker for a cute talking dragon, and I thought it was a very well done book overall. I don't know how many books are in the series, so we'll see. We'll see how long it gets me to get through the series. I would like to finish it someday, just not a priority, which is why it was more of a 3-star book more than a 4-star book for me. The next challenge for the book Junkie trials was On the Hollow Isle, and that was an atmospheric or horror book. I picked Station 11 by Emily Mandel. I ended up giving this book a 4.5 out of 5 stars. This was amazing. It took me a little bit to get into because it is very slow burning. But once I did not want to put it down. Like, I know that's a very cliche thing to say, but I just kind of wanted to see how everything wrapped up at the end. There's so many Easter eggs and there's so much foreshadowing that I would love to read this again sometime and kind of see how everything perfectly pieces together, and what information that you're given at the beginning that you don't realize is important until the end. It is very different than other post-apocalyptic books that I have read because there's no zombies or existential threats really or anything like that. It's just humanity trying to pick up the pieces after a form of, I think it was bird flu, but after a strain of the flu wiped out pretty much 95–99% of the population. It's dual perspective, so it goes into the characters before the flu happens and then after the flu happens, and it was more of a character study than a horror, but it was very atmospheric. It really made me feel for things that you don't really think about in apocalyptic fiction that much. For example, media like The Walking Dead, you're very much concentrated in the present. You're concentrated on the dangers that they're facing from walkers and from other groups of people. This one was definitely more thinking of you know, just the massive trauma and the massive loss of just losing everything, pretty much, every part of civilization, and the difference between people who were adults and survived this outbreak and then people who were born after the outbreak or very little during the outbreak and just growing up in this new world, who is better adapted to grow up in the new world. It kind of shows that it's very easier for children to grow up more adapted and, you know, really enjoy their quality of life because that's all they've known, rather than adults who were like 20s, 30s at the time of the outbreak, you know, are still 20 years later coming to terms with the fact that they're not going to, you know, have any of the life that they lived before. It was really good. I highly enjoyed it. It's definitely not so much a horror as it is an atmospheric book, but it does have some very unsettling moments in it, which, you know, if you are a horror fan, this is definitely one that you would appreciate because it has an amazing atmosphere. If you're not a horror fan, you'll also like this one because it's not very horrific. And I feel like that's weird to say because it does deal with a plague that kills pretty much all of humanity. It's not really graphic about that. It's not really focused on that aspect. It's very much before and after. You don't really see the during. So really good book. Highly recommend it. The next prompt was Empty Barrel Inn, and this was enjoy an indulgent read. And I also doubled up on this challenge and did for the Bard, one of your books must contain poetry or musical themes, and so for that one I did read Martin the Warrior by Brian Jacques. This is a middle grade fantasy series. This is one of the books in the Redwall series, and this one is pretty fun because for most of the series, Martin the Warrior, the titular character in this, is kind of like a King Arthur sort of character. He's a legendary warrior and people look up to him, and his spirit kind of lives on and inspires people in the later books to kind of take up the sword and protect and defend creatures that need their help. So this is kind of fun to read because it's his actual backstory. He's actually alive during this one. In most of these Redwall books, he's not. He comes to creatures in like dreams. Definitely more of a mythological character. This is him during his life, his quests. I ended up giving this one a 3.5 out of 5 stars, and nostalgia does play a really big fact into why I did rate this so high. I mean, I think the Redwall series are wonderful. I loved them as a child. Obviously, I have them all in the background. I really did enjoy this. I remember this was one of the first books as a child that made me cry at the ending. And it's still sad. It still holds up. No spoilers, but I mean, I really enjoy about Brian Jacques, his books. They're fantasy books, and I would almost describe them as like Lord of the Rings light in terms of there's always a quest and there's battles of good and evil, and he really doesn't shy away from killing characters off or just like darker themes that I feel like sometimes even middle grade fantasy and like middle grade content kind of shies away from. I forgot how gory these books are at times. I forgot how sad these books are at times. I think there is something to be said for not shielding children from stuff like that. I don't know. Very biased because this is coming from Spooky Town, USA here, who loves all things horrific and horror, but I think there is something to be said for not shying away from those things. You know, there's some deaths in here. There's some gore in here. I mean, definitely not like really, really graphic gore, but like he describes, you know, creatures getting run through with spears. He doesn't shy away from, you know, a war is happening here. They're fighting against an evil warlord, trying to free slaves and all of that. And yeah, I really enjoyed this one. I am going to continue, I think, trying to read one book from the series every month, right? Having kind of like a lighter book to kind of sandwich in between all of my adult reads. The last book for the book Junkie Trials that I read, which is something that I have not finished, is The Giant Squid, and that is read a book that intimidates you. And that is Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. I have not finished this. I really wanted to finish this month and it just didn't happen. I am on page 507 out of like 1,000. So yeah, out of page 800. This is a chunker and it obviously intimidated me and I didn't finish it, but I thought it deserved an honorable mention because 500 pages is a length of a book, so technically I feel like this should count for something. I mean, I'm not going to count it as a challenge. I didn't complete it, but I did get a lot of the way through, so go ahead and pat myself on the back for that one. The rest of these were just kind of read for fun. They weren't really read for readathons or anything like that. The next book that I'm going to be talking about is Eldest by Christopher Paolini, and I might as well just go ahead and add in that I read this book, and then I also read Brisingr, and both of these, no joke, are very thick, chunky boys. I'm gonna go ahead and hold up this one because it matches my look more today. I've been trying to reread the Inheritance series because this was my first foray after Lord of the Rings into adults fantasy. I don't know if these are considered adult. They don't read like adult to me. They definitely read like YA. So I'm just gonna call them that. If not, feel free to roast me in the comments. They might be adults. I gave both Eldest and Brisingr 3 out of 5 stars. And a lot of that is going to be for nostalgia. I did not like Eldest very much. I mean, I did, but it took me a while to get through it. I don't like Roran's point of view. I just don't. I would rather it be all about Eragon and, you know, Natsuwada. I really enjoy her point of view, but I would also rather have like Arya's point of view, or I don't know, just anyone's point of view other than Roran's. I don't like him. I think he would be a douchebag in this world. I just don't like him as a character at all. That's really hard for me reading Eldest. Brisingr, not so much. I mean, he still kind of bothers me, but I feel like he's less in this one than in Eldest, which I appreciate. This is the third book in a 4-book series about Eragon. He is a dragon rider. He hatches, I just kind of realized I'm reading a lot of dragon shit this month. But Eragon is a dragon rider. He is just a simple farm boy. He finds a dragon egg and becomes the last dragon rider. And he has to rise up and defeat an evil king tyrant, Galbatorix, and save his land, Agalasia. There's a lot to roast about these books. They're not the best written books, but I really enjoyed the hell out of them when I was a kid, when they were coming out. This book came out when I was in like 6th grade. I remember it fully. I remember thinking that like these were some of the first like huge books that I read. These books definitely have like a weird place in my heart because if I would have read them for the first time right now as a 24-year-old, I probably wouldn't get this far into the series because they are very much, first book was written when Christopher Paolini was like 17 years old, which is awesome, but it's very much written by a 17-year-old, you can tell. And I do think the writing gets a whole lot better as the books go on, and I think the plot gets more complex and not borrowed off of other things so much. He kind of has like more original ideas, and it sounds like I hate these books, but I don't. It's just interesting like rereading some childhood things and not really holding up as best as you thought they might, but that's going to be really interesting. So I'm going to try and find Inheritance. That's the last book in this, and read it sometime this year. I really lucked out and found this bad boy for $1. Gonna try and buy the other one secondhand just because they're very much nostalgic reads for me, and I don't really want to spend like $30 on a hardback book that I'm probably just gonna give like 3 stars to. So yeah, the next book I read, and I read this like in the very first week of July. Luckily, it's a reread because otherwise I'm sure I wouldn't remember too much about it. But that was Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban by J.K. Rowling, and I gave this one a 5 out of 5 stars. It is not my favorite book in the series. It is everyone else's favorite book that I share my life with. It's my sister's favorite book, it's my dad's favorite book, it's my boyfriend's favorite book, and it's my other sister's favorite book. She hasn't read the full series though, so take that with a grain of salt, but it's not my favorite book, but it is one of my favorites. It's a good old time. There are so many characters that are introduced in this one. I love Buckbeak. He's a sweet little angel. I wish I had a hippogriff. I'm really not going to give a synopsis of Harry Potter, but I do think there's something to be said that this one is, I mean, I think a little bit different than the other ones. You don't have a confrontation with Voldemort. This is the only book where Voldemort takes a back burner, and you're dealing with other threats, and this book really made me realize as an adult the wizarding world kind of sucks. Don't come for me. I love Harry Potter. They're like my favorite series in this earth, but just kind of reading some of the things, I mean, I'm a big old hippie, but like the Dementors, that's just like such like a horrifying concept that like, I know this happened in the second book, but like when they just shipped Hagrid to there before a trial, like we're just gonna eat someone's soul before a trial. I just, you see several times throughout the books that the wizarding justice system is like non-existent. It's like guilty until proven innocent, and this book just kind of made me mad as an adult, especially at the ending when we're talking about Harry actually getting not one but two father figures, and then finding out that one of them has to leave. I mean, both of them have to leave, but especially, you know, he thinks everything is going to turn out okay. He's going to explain that Sirius Black is innocent and get to live with him, and he has that hope, and he's just 13 years old. He's a child. Man, these books have like a different kind of feeling for me when I'm an adult. Like, I kind of glossed past some things when I was a child that, like, okay, yeah, it was sad that he didn't get to live with Sirius, but on to the next one. And this one, I'm really thinking about how traumatic it is for a small child to think that, first of all, you're going to confront the man that killed your parents. Like, the balls on that 13-year-old. Second of all, you find out that he is actually innocent and he's your godfather and he's a wonderful person, and you're gonna go live with him and not your abusive family that you're living with right now, and then finding out that that gets taken away from you again. It's an emotional roller coaster at the end. I honestly kind of teared up at some points because I was like, I know how this series ends, and it's not the way I want it to end. It's not the way I wanted it to end when I was a child reading them for the first time. It's not the way I wanted it to end now. And I mean, I'm just talking about like the Harry and Sirius arc, and just generally Harry and like his parental figures arcs. I feel like all of them kind of get unfairly taken away from him. Yeah, moving on to the next one. The next book I read was Lyra's Oxford by Philip Pullman. This was an audiobook. This is actually a short story. It was less than an hour of an audiobook, so it definitely was kind of bonus material for the series. I definitely wouldn't read this if you haven't already read the Golden Compass trilogy. This is, I think, something that I appreciate a lot more now, knowing that there's a second series coming out, and that is coming out and that is out, as opposed to when it first came out. I feel like I would have felt like a little cheated and a little weirded out that we get kind of just like a glimpse of Lyra as an older child. I think she's like an older teenager in this. I loved it. I feel like I couldn't give something that was literally like 40 minutes anything more than like a 3.5 out of 5 stars, because there wasn't a whole lot of story, but I am excited to, I did take some notes during this one, and I'm excited to see like how much of the new Book of Dust series is foreshadowed in this one. So that'll be interesting to see. Not a lot that I can tell you about this one that wouldn't spoil a whole chunk of the main series, the Golden Compass series, but I love the His Dark Materials series, so go read that if you haven't already. It is amazing, and this was a really great little companion piece to it. I think it's my favorite out of all of the little companion works. I guess they're novellas that Philip Pullman has put out since writing that trilogy. It was really good. I enjoyed it. I wished it was a whole lot longer than 40 minutes, so 3.5 out of 5 stars to that one. The next book I read was actually a book that I read while on vacation. It was an audiobook. It was Becoming by Michelle Obama. I actually gave this book a 5 out of 5 stars, so I'll go ahead and say it right now. I am a flaming liberal. I was never actually old enough to vote for Obama. I missed it by like a year the second time, but, you know, I would have. This is a book that, you know, I probably wouldn't read if you're Republican. I don't know. I mean, if you feel like you're like moderate and like very open-minded, I think you could read it and learn a lot from it. But just based on like low reviews from Goodreads, if you were like a super, you know, big, super right-leaning conservative, I don't know why you'd pick this book up, honestly. I mean, it's Michelle Obama's memoir. There are like some politics that are in it that are discussed, because obviously that's a big part of her life. Those deserve to be a part of her memoir. So, I mean, if you hate the woman, don't pick it up, obviously. You're not going to get a lot out of this book. I really enjoyed it. I ended up giving it a 5 stars because I think it's just kind of a perfect piece of memoir literature. I think it was a very good blend of the stories she wanted to tell, of her childhood to adulthood, like where she is now, and a perfect blend of kind of what people want to read, if that makes sense. I don't want to sound rude here, but I feel like a lot of people are reading this for, you know, the Obama content and for, you know, when she marries Barack, and the White House years, I think, are what most people are probably interested in, and like her earlier career. And I think she kind of knows that going into it, but there is, you know, a lot of the book that is focused on herself and her childhood and growing up and really how that impacted her as an adult. And I thought it was very wonderfully written. I really enjoyed it. I teared up at the end. I don't think that Obama was the perfect president. I don't think, you know, such a thing exists because, you know, the nature of people aren't perfect. So I'm also not like an Obama fangirl or anything like that. I mean, there were definitely issues that were caused during the presidency. I definitely am a lot more left-leaning than the Obamas. I genuinely felt at the end of the day, this was a man and a woman who everything that they did, and I'm saying woman because obviously she wasn't president, but she did have a lot of impact on programs like the Get Up and Play movement, and you know, she had started gardens in the White House to raise food from, to actually cook in the White House, like a lot of projects like that. I think everything that they kind of did during those years in the super public eye, they were really genuinely trying to do what they thought was best for the people, and I just thought that was wonderful. I don't know if Michelle wrote all of this. I feel like she did. It very much seems like her authentic voice, listening to her just kind of talk and be interviewed. This book very much reads like that, and she is, you know, a very well-educated woman. Not saying that you can't be a good writer and not well-educated, but it just very much reads like her, and I listened to the audiobook. She narrates it. It's wonderful. Yeah, 5 out of 5 stars. It was a very wonderful reading experience. The last 2 books are also 5 out of 5 stars. I had a very good reading month overall, even though I did tend to think that I wasn't having a good reading month because just of the shenanigans with the readathons I was trying to do, but I did end up reading 10 books, get really far into an 11th book, so it was a good reading month, and I really am actually enjoying doing this wrap up because I'm kind of remembering all of the really good books that I read that I kind of put in the back burner because I was upset that I didn't finish the readathon. But the next book is also an audiobook that I read on vacation, and it was Good Morning, Good Night by Lin-Manuel Miranda, and this one I listened to on the plane. I'm a very anxious little bean. I genuinely do have anxiety disorder, and planes make me anxious. I don't have flying anxiety. I do have anxiety about just travel in general and just breaking up my routine in general. So I was kind of tripping and really not looking forward to the plane trips to the vacation, even though I had a wonderful vacation. I'm too anxious to ever really enjoy flying. And this was the perfect audiobook for that. Again, it was like maybe an hour, but I think it was more on like the 45 minutes side. And I actually listened to this a couple different times, 2.5 times during the course of this month because I had, let's see, about like 4 hours of flying this month, and I did kind of branch out and listen to something else on the way back, which I'll get into in my August wrap up. But if you follow Lin-Manuel Miranda on social media, on Twitter, he kind of does like these little pep talks in the morning and in the night, and they're sweet and wholesome and wonderful. And this is just a compilation of like his most popular ones. Damn it if a lot of this wasn't stuff that I needed to hear. It was just really light, really wonderful. You know, he's a wonderful person, I feel like. Genuinely just following him on Twitter and just watching interviews with him, and I just feel like he's a genuine wonderful person, and I really enjoyed listening to like a 45-minute pep talk of this wonderful man just telling me that I matter. Very good feelings were had. I actually really want to purchase this just because I loved it, and also because Johnny's son illustrates it, and I did listen to it on audiobook, so I didn't get to see the illustrations. So I definitely think this is a book that I'm going to be investing in the future and rereading because it's wonderful. Maybe keep it on like my nightstand or coffee table as one of those books just to thumb through every once in a while, just because it's so precious and wholesome. Now, moving on from precious and wholesome, the last book, my favorite book that I read in the month of July, and you know, I did read a lot of good books, so it was very hard to pick one. 5 out of 5 stars, obviously, since it was my favorite book that I did read, and that was Little Star by John Ajvide Lindqvist. He gets compared to Stephen King a lot. He's called Sweden's Stephen King, and I definitely kind of see that because they both write horror, and they both have like this very realistic writing style of describing everyday life that I feel like everyone can relate to, or something that you may or may not really love. I know a lot of people either love or hate that about King, how there's like a lot of unnecessary description, just describing certain things. if you don't like that, you probably won't like this, because I feel like Lindquist doesn't do that as much as King, but it is very much a part of his writing style, just kind of describing everyday life. I loved this. This was creepy. This was weird as hell. This is creepy little kid horror at its finest, and that is one of my favorite tropes. I just love little kids doing creepy shit. And this had that. I would say if you liked Carrie, you'll really like this too. It's very much a story of young women, outsiders in society, kind of overcoming, shall we say, society. Hey guys, it's Editing Taylor. I just wanted to pop on here because I did think it was important, because I did rave about this book so much that if you did want to pick up Little Star, there are a lot of trigger warnings in this one. It is very graphic. There are graphic descriptions of violence. There is sexual assault. There is physical abuse of a minor. There's sexual abuse of a minor, violence against small children, and there is just a lot of heavy-handed gore. Trigger warnings also for, I'm gonna say, suicide and self-harm, because it's not really a character trying to commit suicide, but there were some parts in here that, as someone who is triggered by self-harm, kind of borderline verged on that, so be aware of that. It's just a really dark book, and I didn't mention it in the original review, so I really wanted to pop on here and give those disclaimers. Be prepared, lots of triggers. It follows two young women, and their names are very, very similar. It's Therese and Teresa, which kind of got confusing at times because, again, you just kind of mix around a couple of the letters to get the other. So Therese is a child that may or may not be human. She was found in the woods by her foster father, and he was on like a truffle hunting trip, and he found this child in a plastic bag. He thought it was dead at first, and then she started like singing in perfect pitch. And this guy is a musician, or he was a musician when he was younger, and he was a little odd, and his first reaction was, oh, I can teach her to be the star that I never was. She has a gift of perfect pitch as, again, an infant, which is bananas. And so he takes her in and starts training her to be a singer, and she has a little bit of a very strange upbringing, which makes her into a very, very odd duckling. She meets this girl named Teresa, who has a very traditional upbringing. She's got a mom and a dad, two older brothers. She's born into the family, and she is kind of picked on a lot because she's a heavier set girl. She's not very conventionally attractive. I say conventionally attractive because people call her ugly in this book all the time, but at the same time she's like 12, so I'm not gonna call a 12-year-old ugly, you know? It's very much, Teresa is dealing with being on the outs. She never feels like she fits in. She sees Therese on TV, on like an American Idol sort of show, and really identifies with this very strange little girl. She feels like this resonant chord of being not of this society, being on the outside, and they start corresponding, and crazy weirdness happens. It's really good. This is a fast-paced book. This book is a chunky monkey. It's about 500 pages, but it doesn't read like that at all. I think when I picked this up, I read like half of it in a night, and then I read the other half because it's like a train wreck. You don't want to see what's happening, especially when you see what's starting to build up and happen, but at the same time you don't want to miss it, you know? And I feel like that's all you can really hope for in horror. I loved both main characters. Teresa a little bit more. I feel like anyone who's kind of felt like the weird kid at school can identify with her in the beginning of the book. So you have two main characters, and they're kind of unlikable for different reasons. I think Therese is very hard to like. I didn't really like her. I thought she was a very interesting character, and one of my favorite characters I've read this year to read about, but I don't like her. Teresa is very unlikable in a very relatable way. Highly enjoyed this one. Gave it a 5 out of 5 stars, and that was my favorite book for July. But those were all of the books that I read in the month of July. Did we read any of the same ones? I don't know, maybe. Leave them down below. Leave your favorite book that you read in July down below. If you liked this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up, leave a comment down below, subscribe, all that good stuff. I will catch you guys in my next video. Bye!